Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we are continuing with the reading of the Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish, Volume 4, also known as 残疾暴君的掌心鱼宠by Xue Shan Fei Hu. And today is actually just going to be a short day, so I'm letting you know in advance. If I can, I will read 2 chapters and post them later today. But for now, 2 chapters was all I could give you at the moment. So let's go ahead with chapter 125. Heart of the Matter. Li Yu had his guesses as to who had orchestrated the poisoning of baby Prince Ting, but he was just Prince Ting's consort. If he tried to look into harem incidents from several decades ago, he'd face a lot of roadblocks, so it was best to just let the Emperor investigate. For now, there was nothing he and Prince Ting could do but trust the Emperor. Other than that, there was a horrifying fact to consider. In this world, Prince Ting was cured, but the Prince Ting in the original book must have been mute his whole life. No wonder the children he had, either in this world or the book, could all speak. It wasn't because he was lucky. It was because his muteness wasn't genetic. In this world, the truth was fortunately revealed, but in the original novel, there was no carp spirit to help him figure out the truth. Li Yu felt they had gotten lucky, but he was also scared. Although the secret to Prince Ting's muteness had been dangling in front of him for a while, he'd almost missed it. Prince Ting had ended up vomiting blood out of panic as a direct result of Li Yu choosing to complete the side mission, Heart of Compassion, and the reward for the mission was a prescription that had to do with Prince Ting's muteness. Adding Xue Wuzi to the prescription created the poison Prince Ting was suffering from, while adding extra healing ingredients helped Prince Ting recover now. One never knew what surprises the fish scamming system had in store. Sometimes, if one did a good deed, one was rewarded. With the side mission finished, Li Yu had been able to help Lady Liang, which had also resulted in him and Prince Ting overcoming one of their most difficult obstacles so far. The end of the road was in sight. After the Emperor took everyone back to the palace, he'd ordered the guards to throw the Six Prince in prison on the charges of holding Lady Liang hostage and suspected attempted regicide. No one dared speak up on the Six Prince's behalf. Since the Six Prince had dared to try to harm him, the Emperor was well within his rights to dispose of him, but he couldn't actually bring himself to kill him. Keeping him alive was a sign of extreme benevolence. This time, concubine Zhang knew that the Six Prince had committed an unforgivable crime. So in the spirit of self-preservation, she shut herself in Yongfu Palace and didn't come out unless absolutely necessary. The Emperor reprimanded her severely, but as she wasn't directly involved with the Six Prince's actions, he allowed her to keep her concubine title. In front of the Emperor, she was usually just a tremulous quail, and it was precisely this quail-like personality that saved her in the end. As for Lady Liang, she no longer felt anything for the Six Prince. The shock of everything that had happened caused her to miscarry the same night she was taken hostage, and without another word, she packed up her belongings and left to live with her parents. The framed concubine Lu was released after a bout of investigation and reunited with the 8th prince, while the 7th prince and his mother, Consort Li, learned from the emperor that they had been part of the 6th prince's plot as well. The 7th prince learned that although he might know someone, he couldn't know their heart. The 2 young princes matured quite a bit thanks to the events of the hunting festival. And since the emperor had sent Prince Ting's 4 sons to the imperial study, the 7th and 8th princes were no longer the youngest ones there. Now they were uncles. The 2 little princes puffed out their chests proudly. The emperor was laying the way for Prince Ting, and he explicitly told the young princes that Prince Ting was the one who had cleared them of any suspicion. As a result, the 2 princes made sure to take special care of their nephews. With the imperial study peaceful and harmonious, the emperor was very satisfied. If the 7th prince and 8th prince had a good relationship with the 4 children, that meant they were on good terms with Prince Ting, so there was no need to worry about what might happen in the future. Head eunuch Luo, meanwhile, was ordered to investigate Puliu's cause of death. In the end, it was revealed that she had died from poison. The emperor ordered the elderly imperial physician to assist, and he found that there was residual poison in her body, the exact same that Prince Ting had suffered from, Xue mixed with female ginseng. That made it clear that Puliu had taken the concoction herself and passed the poison to the newborn Prince Ting through her milk. The poison must have taken hold of her after she left the palace. It was lucky that she didn't directly give Prince Ting the poison, or he might not have lived for more than a few months. Since the Xue was passed through her milk, its toxicity was weakened, so instead of death, its only effect was that Prince Ting couldn't speak. The poison that stayed in Prince Ting's body caused him no other harm. That was where the poisoner's shrewdness lay. If Prince Ting had been poisoned directly and died, the emperor would have launched a strict investigation. But if he was poisoned indirectly and simply appeared to have been born mute, the emperor would at most have the imperial physicians take a look at him. He'd pray to the heavens, but he couldn't punish anyone. But this way, even if the emperor and Empress Xiaohui's son remained in this world, it was almost the same as having no son. The emperor was very sure that he and Puliu held no grudges against each other, so he didn't understand why she would do this. Puliu must have been acting on someone else's orders. Luo Zheisheng continued to track down her family members. He found that her family had fallen victim to a plague not long after she passed away, and they had perished as well. And of the 2 midwives that delivered Empress Xiaohui's child back then, one of them fell off a cliff. Her body never recovered, and the other was run over by a carriage after she got drunk. The imperial physician who diagnosed Prince Ting had already been quite old at the time and passed away shortly after he retired and returned to his hometown. Not a single one was left alive. The emperor, who was familiar with the court's methods, immediately thought it was most likely that all these people had been deliberately silenced. He recalled that many things had seemed quite fishy back then. The investigation thus came to a grinding halt only halfway done. It really gave the emperor a headache. Since it concerned Prince Ting, he summoned Prince Ting and his consort to the palace. These days, the emperor knew how smart the consort was. Li Yu always had unique insights, and it was Li Yu who'd found the poison in Puliu's sealed room and saved Prince Ting. The emperor thought that he might as well ask Li Yu for his opinion. Under the emperor's orders, Prince Ting quickly came to the palace with Li Yu. Prince Ting's speaking skills were improving day by day. Other than a hoarse voice and being a little slow at conversation, there were no problems. Even if he stopped improving now, the emperor wouldn't mind. "Tianzhi, how are you feeling?" the emperor asked. Prince Ting slowly answered, "Very good." Though Prince Ting could speak now, he had no desire to chat with the emperor and was usually quite concise. The emperor, on the other hand, had prepared a bunch of questions for Prince Ting. He wanted to ask after his son, but the words just wouldn't leave his mouth. Wang Xi had told the emperor that Prince Ting woke up early every day to read out loud in the manor, reading everything loudly from the 3-character classics to storybooks. Prince Ting looked cold and aloof. The emperor had no problem imagining him fighting and killing, but reading storybooks out loud? Prince Ting had a little book tucked into his sleeve. When speaking to the emperor, he would sometimes take it out to glance at it. The emperor knew that Prince Ting used to prepare notes, but those weren't needed anymore. What was the booklet for? When Prince Ting wasn't paying attention, the emperor snuck a glance at it. It was just a bunch of strange, messy drawings. "My consort wrote this," Prince Ting explained, smiling. Li Yu was afraid that Prince Ting would suddenly forget how to pronounce a word, so he wrote out a list of pinyin for commonly used words in case of emergencies. Prince Ting always had it with him. Even if he didn't forget any pronunciation, he would take it out to look at it. Even having Li Yu here with him couldn't deter Prince Ting from wanting to show off. The emperor felt that since Prince Ting had been cured of his muteness, his relationship with his consort had reached new heights. He'd initially found it amusing, but by now he'd been exposed to it so many times that he was numb to it. This was the result of seeing too much. Back to business. After chatting with the young couple a little, the emperor fully explained the current situation. "Royal father, how brilliant to have found so many clues already." Li Yu was quick to flatter him. The emperor had launched a quick and thorough investigation, so the news had come quickly. Li Li Yu hadn't expected that everyone who was directly involved would be dead. The emperor cleared his throat, unnerved by the sudden praise. It's just that the leads have all become dead ends, so I do not know what to do now. That was exactly what Li Yu was waiting for. He got to the heart of the matter at once. The people might not be here anymore, he said, but things are. There are some things that can't be changed. Royal Father, perhaps you should look into Xue Wuzi. The elderly imperial physician had said that Xue Wuzi only grew on the peaks of snowy mountains, but there were none around the empire. As a result, Xue Wuzi was so rare that even the Imperial Academy of Medicine didn't have any. It's suspicious, said Li Yu. Why would Puliu have an ingredient that even the imperial physicians can't get their hands on? And Xue Wuzi is usually a strengthening ingredient, but once it interacts with female ginseng, it becomes poisonous. I believe that the person behind this must be medically knowledgeable, at least when it comes to Xue Wuzi's poisonous properties. According to the elderly imperial physician, the formula of poisonous powder was the same as the ancient prescription Li Yu had, but with the addition of Xue Wuzi. Those who were unfamiliar with its properties would have assumed that the Xue Wuzi was added for a further nurturing and strengthening effect. Perhaps that was another way to hide the poison. Li Yu fretted as he spoke. Xue Wuzi was rare in the empire. So was it possible that it had to do with another country? There were no foreigners in the emperor's harem, though. For example, even though the empire was allied with Jinjue and they were friendly with one another, the emperor would only be able to accept a marriage between the princess of Jinjue and a prince who wasn't due to inherit. He would never accept someone from Jinjue as one of his own concubines. That was how he'd always done things. Li Yu strongly suspected that Puliu's Xue Wuzi came from another country, but where could it have come from if there were no foreigners in the palace? Could Puliu have been from a foreign country? The more Li Yu thought about it, the stranger he thought it was, and he found himself asking the question out loud. The emperor was a bit surprised. He fell into deep thought. I will order a new investigation into Xue Wuzi, he said after a while. Realizing that the emperor didn't want to elaborate, Li Yu didn't ask any further questions. When they left Tianjing Palace, Li Yu gently nudged Prince Jing with his elbow. Tianchi, do you know where the nearest snowy mountains are? Prince Jing couldn't speak while they were outside, so he simply wrote one word into Li Yu's palm. Lo Lan. What's Lo Lan? Li Yu was confused. He was a transmigrating fish, and his geography knowledge was pitiful. Jinjue was the only neighboring country he knew, and that was only thanks to the original novel. He had never heard of Lolan before. Prince Jing wrote, Lolan has snowy mountains. 30 years ago, royal father toppled Lolan. So, it was a country that no longer existed. No wonder he'd never heard of it before. Could Xue Wuzi be from Lolan then? Li Yu had already thought it was possible that the person who harmed Prince Jing had a grudge against the emperor. Could it be that people from Lolan had infiltrated the palace and tried to take revenge on the emperor? Or he recalled the glint in the emperor's eyes earlier. Could it be that the emperor had had relations with a Lolan woman and brought her into the harem? But his favorite was still Empress Xiaohui, and out of jealousy, she hurt Prince Jing? The more Li Yu thought, the more dramatic the imagined storyline became. Prince Jing smiled and pulled on Li Yu's sleeve. Come with me, he signaled with his eyes. Li Yu followed Prince Jing for a little while and was brought into a slightly familiar-looking courtyard. Li Yu glanced at the plaque. It was Jingtai Hall. He'd stayed in Jingtai Hall for a couple of days when he first turned into a fish, but it had been over a year since then, and Li Yu had spent far longer in Prince Jing's manor. Jingtai Hall was now a little unfamiliar, so he didn't recognize it immediately. The servants of Jingtai Hall bowed to their master when they saw him. Prince Jing pulled Li Yu straight into the bedroom. Li Yu blushed. He'd been clamoring for a daughter recently, but he'd sucked essence several times already, to the point that Prince Jing was developing dark circles, and there was still no sign of a daughter. It was too hard without the one-shot-and-done stat. Li Yu was so eager for a daughter, he'd even grown a little superstitious, wondering if Prince Sting's manner just wasn't conducive to having a daughter somehow. He'd just been wanting a change of scenery. Prince Sting was a great husband. He gave Li Yu what he wanted the moment he wanted it. Jingtai Hall was a great choice. It was emotionally significant for both of them, since it was technically where they first met. Prince Sting, meanwhile, knew that there was something in Jingtai Hall that possibly had to do with Lolan, but in the time that it took him to grab it and turn around again, he found the carp spirit under the quilt, dewy-eyed, trying to seduce him. Chapter 126. Lusty, Horny, Fishy. The shameless fish couldn't wait anymore. He patted the bed. Tianchi, come quickly. Prince Sting couldn't help but laugh. He put down what he was holding and walked over to hug and kiss his fish. Li Yu was fiddling with Prince Sting's sash, about to take it off, when a notification suddenly appeared. User, the side mission, Warm Cotton Jacket, has reached the activation conditions. Please confirm whether you'd like to begin the mission and what form you would like to complete it in. 1. Human form. 2. Fish form. Holy shit! Li Yu sat up suddenly. This familiar format. And Warm Cotton Jacket. Wasn't that what you called a daughter? This should be the mission that they'd get them a daughter. So, it really was a location issue. Wasn't this? She's coming. She's coming. Li Yu excitedly waved his arms around, planning to enter the system immediately. Prince Sting had no idea who Li Yu thought was coming. He was just starting to get jealous when a soft noise came from outside the window. His gaze turned cold. He jumped up to the window, pulled out his sword, and stabbed it through. His sword was blocked, and there was a crisp sound as blades connected with each other. An assassin! On the bed, Li Yu no longer had the capacity to care about the notification. He was about to get up and lend a hand when Prince Sting, having already reached the door, suddenly came back. What are you doing? Li Yu asked anxiously. Go chase after him. Even though he could speak now, when it came to emergency situations, Li Yu was still used to letting his actions speak for him. He patted Li Yu's hand, then grabbed the brocade quilt and wrapped him up like a spring roll. Li Yu knew his husband well. All right, don't worry, he said quickly. I won't go anywhere. Prince Sting was worried that Li Yu would run out after him and put himself in danger. It was a little exasperating, but Li Yu still found it sweet. Prince Sting nodded at Li Yu, then ran out. His guards had already begun fighting the assassin. Li Yu had promised Prince Sting he wouldn't leave the room, so he sat on the bed, all bundled up, and looked boldly out the window. Why did Jingtai Hall always attract assassins? He didn't understand. The assassin had been eavesdropping outside. They hadn't been talking about anything serious, though. Perhaps the assassin had misunderstood when Li Yu kept saying, she's coming, and ended up exposing himself. Li Yu watched for a while. The guards were skilled, but he could tell the assassin was as well. They were reaching a stalemate. But the assassin was only one person, and the number of guards kept increasing. Soon, Prince Sting joined the fight. He launched a surprise attack when the assassin was distracted and kicked him in the chest, knocking him to the ground. My husband is so cool. Li Yu was about to cheer when a guard moved forward to tie the assassin up. Eerily, the assassin chuckled coldly and committed suicide. Everything happened so fast. The assassin used an unknown method to suddenly spray a large amount of dark liquid from his chest. Reacting quickly, Prince Sting pulled the guard aside just in time. The liquid seemed to be a strong corrosive. The assassin soon turned into a pile of sludge. The spectating Li Yu was so shocked that he covered his mouth and shrank away from the window. Prince Sting promptly rushed back to the room to check on Li Yu. Xiao Yu, don't be afraid, he called out in a low voice. I'm fine. Some fear still lingered. The assassin just now. He's been taken care of. Don't worry, Prince Sting said. Li Yu nodded. It wasn't that he'd become more delicate now that he was in ancient times, but he was truly unprepared for that scene. Anyone who saw a living human turn into a puddle of goo would be frightened. It was terrifying to know there were things out there that could melt even human bodies. But honestly, when he thought about it, that was no big deal in the face of a transmigrating fish and its system. Frowning, Li Yu managed to make himself accept this explanation. Tianchi, what's up with this assassin? He asked. Prince Ting helped him sit down and pointed at the item that he'd fetched earlier. A sword. The assassin left this last time, he said. They're working together. Huh? There were way too many assassins in Jingcai Hall. Which time was last time? The female assassin, Prince Ting reminded him. Li Yu finally remembered. When he was still a good mission-completing system fish, during the share a bed with the Tyrant quest, he'd run into a female assassin who ended up being killed by Prince Ting. Li Yu had always thought that the female assassin had been sent by either the Marquis of Ping or the Marquis of An, or perhaps the Sixth Prince, like the guy who was bitten by Xiongfeng. But it was impossible for these three people to keep challenging Prince Ting now. Where did this assassin come from? And why was Prince Ting so sure that the assassin this time was related to the female assassin from last time? Prince Ting had evidence. He pointed to the sword that belonged to the female assassin. Li Yu could clearly see that it was an ordinary sword with a plum blossom pattern on the hilt. Prince Ting ordered the guards to bring the sword of the most recent assassin over. The man's body had turned to liquid, but his sword was still fine. Li Yu realized that this sword was decorated with the same plum blossoms as the other one. If it had been just one sword, plum blossoms wouldn't mean anything in particular. But since both swords had it, it meant it was a marker of sorts. No wonder Prince Ting thought they were connected. Li Yu had the same suspicion now, too. Why did you kill the female assassin from before? Li Yu asked carefully. He'd always wondered about this. Prince Ting didn't answer him directly. He just pointed to the puddle of goo on the ground. Perhaps that was the answer. If he hadn't killed her, she would have killed herself and turned into liquid too. Li Yu came back to his senses. Did you know back then already that they would do that? If Prince Ting hadn't pulled the guard back, he might have been splashed. Who knew what terrifying outcome would result from that? Prince Ting nodded. I was attacked by these assassins once when I was younger, but I didn't know who was behind it. Could it be related to the poisoning that made you mute? Li Yu asked worriedly. Why didn't you tell Royal Father? If Prince Ting had run into these assassins before, they had always wanted to take his life. And considering that corrosive substance, this was once again someone who was familiar with drugs and compounds, just like whoever had poisoned Prince Ting. Li Yu felt it wasn't unreasonable to conclude that the same people were behind both incidents. Prince Ting only slightly gazed at Li Yu. Li Yu suddenly worked it out. Prince Ting hadn't been able to tell the Emperor because these assassins would simply melt away rather than allow themselves to be captured. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he might not have believed it. Never mind the Emperor. And in the past, the Emperor hadn't trusted Prince Ting as much as he did now. On top of that, the female assassin's body hadn't turned into liquid because Prince Ting killed her before she could do it, but the Emperor still wasn't able to find anything. These people were powerful. They were better at hiding than the Sixth Prince. In the past, when the other princes had been around, it had never been obvious who was behind this. But if the culprit chose to keep making attempts even now, they'd be sentencing themselves to death. Let's go. Let's tell Royal Father. Li Yu threw the covers off, deciding to head to Qianqing Palace. He could be a witness. Prince Ting's eyes twitched, and he pulled Li Yu back, staring at him with a strange expression. You're going to go just like that? Li Yu followed his gaze down to look at his fully exposed self, the result of how eager he was for a daughter. He quickly wrapped the quilt back around himself and laughed awkwardly. I forgot. Of course, we'll go after I get dressed. Once he had clothes on, they went to Qianqing Palace to see the Emperor. But for once, the Emperor refused to see them. Head eunuch Luo was attending to business and wasn't around the Emperor right now, so a servant on duty at Qianqing Palace came to deliver the message. It was getting late, and the Emperor had ordered Prince Ting and his consort to return. They could talk another time. Li Yu glanced at the moon high in the sky. It was indeed quite late, so Prince Sing returned to the manor with Li Yu. On the way, Li Yu chatted and laughed with Prince Sing, but he suddenly started urging him to hurry, as if he'd remembered something. When they got back, Consort Yu didn't even check in on the fish children first. He pulled Prince Sing straight into the bedroom. Prince Sing felt like this was exactly what had happened earlier in the night, except reversed. Li Yu was busy taking off his clothes as he walked further into the room, muttering, "Hurry, hurry, or she'll leave." Who? Prince Sing finally couldn't hold back his jealousy. Li Yu couldn't help but laugh when he saw Prince Sing's dark expression. He stopped laughing, wrapped his arms around Prince Sing's neck, and whispered into his ear, blushing. The prince's ears turned slightly red when he learned who she was. He wanted her to arrive too, so he kissed Li Yu on the lips and carried the indecent fish to bed. Li Yu had been interrupted by the assassin earlier before he could choose one of the options. Now, he was anxiously trying to make up for it, afraid the notification would disappear. The notification didn't pop up immediately, but luckily, after he and Prince Sting had absorbed essence once and Prince Sting was holding him down on the bed, the system started squalling again. Wait! The messy-haired Li Yu wildly clobbered the messy-haired Prince Sting. Prince Sting had to stop halfway. Xiao Yu? What's wrong? Wait for me, husband. Mwah! Li Yu smooched his husband and entered the system. As the notification popped up, Li Yu told himself that he had to be careful and choose fish form. It didn't hurt in fish form, so he mustn't make the wrong choice and choose human form. Li Yu thought this as he selected the first option and tapped confirm immediately, only to realize that this time the first option was human form instead of fish form. Oh, holy shit! Why did the option order change? Would it kill the system to not scam fish for once? Li Yu felt like crying when he saw that the mission was now in progress. System, can't I undo the choice I made? Li Yu tried to haggle with the system. The fish scamming system took every chance it could to scam him, so it obviously wouldn't let him undo it. Li Yu was kicked out of the system and found his husband hugging his waist. His thoughts were all messed up. What should he do? On one side was his sexy husband and his long-cherished daughter, and on the other was a swollen stomach and immense pain. Sob. Could he get off the bed and decide next time? Xiao Yu. Prince Sing called out to him in a low voice, lifted his bangs out of his face, and kissed his forehead. Which little fish had said earlier that he wasn't allowed to leave until their daughter was here? It was this exact same fish who'd suddenly gone into meditation. Prince Sing hugged his fish, practically waiting to bite him everywhere. Was it so easy to be distracted when they were together? Sob. Li Yu could sense Prince Sing's hidden frustration. With the arrow already on the bowstring, how could he not let it fly? Li Yu was shooting himself in the foot, but he knew how to enjoy himself. Now that Prince Sing could speak, Li Yu's scalp went numb, and he found himself panting slightly every time Prince Sing called his name in that low, hoarse voice. He even forgot what his last name was. With this pleasure staring him in the face, who'd remember anything about fish or human form? Prince Sing spent quite a lot of effort in order to make sure his daughter arrived smoothly, filling Li Yu up until he couldn't open his eyes and was about to pass out any moment. Finally, Prince Sing wound down and lovingly kissed Li Yu's eyelids. To prepare for a daughter, Li Yu had started doing a lot of strange but cute things, like putting a small soft pillow underneath his waist so he didn't waste anything. Prince Sing didn't understand what he was doing at first, but when he looked at the messy Xiao Yu, he suddenly realized what was in danger of being wasted. I need a moment. He blushed. He wanted to give Li Yu a daughter too, and he had something better than a soft pillow. He reached his arm over to let Li Yu use it as a cushion. Li Yu's back, hips, and legs were all sore, and he fell asleep immediately. When he woke up, he found that his back had been supported the whole night. Fuck! A daughter would have to come now. Sob, sob, sob. But he'd have a large belly soon. What should he do? Li Yu desperately wanted this daughter, but now that she was coming, he was beside himself with worry. How much would it hurt to do this in human form? Li Yu hated pain, but he was a father and understood his own priorities and boundaries. This was life. Now that it was here, he couldn't say he didn't want it, especially the darling daughter he'd been looking forward to for so long. Gazing at the peaceful sleeping face on his husband next to him, Li Yu made his decision. Experiencing birth in human form couldn't be that hard. For his husband and his daughter, he'd do it. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed those chapters. I didn't mean to crack up like that. I had to stop recording because I just needed a moment because Li Yu is funny. He cracks me up so freaking much, but I'm glad that he's such a comedic relief of a character. Anyway, there are really like only two things that I have to say. So the first one is actually when the assassin came around and Li Yu was wrapped up like a spring roll, and he was like, he thought it was exasperating that Prince Ting didn't want him to leave, but it was sweet. I was like, sir, do you not remember the last time you told Prince Ting that you weren't going to go anywhere and then you ended up going somewhere and you got kidnapped and you were in your merman form, manmer, whichever one, manmer form? So it's completely plausible that he's like, make sure you don't leave your butt from this spot. Anyway, the only other thing that I was going to say is actually about the warm cotton jacket, which was something else that a daughter was called. Specifically, it's xiao mian ao. So that's the third tone, xiao for small, mian for cotton, and then ao for jacket. Now, technically, like I said, this is a common endearment for little girls, but the way you say jacket, just like regular jacket in Mandarin now, is actually just jiake, which is very, well, fitting, jacket, jiake. So obviously that was inspired by the English word. So that is all I have to say. Like I said, if I am able to, I will record 2 more chapters and post them a little bit later today. That way you can still have your 4 chapters for the day. But we'll see. Just maybe a short day, given my schedule. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed these chapters, and I'm super excited to see what is to come with this little baby girl. And I'll see you next time. 我爱你们